Well, it's the battle between two of the most aggressive and dynamic players in the world of chess. Parham Maghsoodloo takes on Salem Saleh. Both the players are not yet arrived on their board. The arbiter comes and starts the clock. We go into a fast forward mode just so that we can get the game started. Salem arrives when he has lost a minute on the clock, opens the game with 1d4. 1d4 on the board, adjusts all his pieces, and we are now waiting for Parham to make his way here. Parham not aware that the game has started. After close to 2.5 minutes, he finally arrives here on the board. He has lost around 2.5 minutes on the clock, but he calms himself down, adjusts all his pieces. 12.5 minutes is a good enough time to play a good game of chess. He pushes his pawn to d5 and off we go. c4, e6, the queen's gambit declined, knight to c3 and bishop b4. Kind of the advanced Ragozin in the position. a3, bishop c3, bc3, and now knight to f6. e3 has been played. White has the bishop pair. Black tries to be solid in the center. Bishop d3. I like White's position overall, but this is all Parham's preparation. He now plays his queen to c7. Salem puts his knight out on f3. Short castle by Parham, and also white castles. If you look at the position, the main advantage that White has is the bishop pair and a nice center, and so Salem goes a4. His plan is to bring his bishop out to a3. Parham goes bishop a6 and now bishop to a3, attacking the rook. The rook comes to d8. Now in such positions, normally you can go c takes d5, but he goes rook c1. Parham can now play bishop takes c4, which is a nice move, but if he takes with the pawn, I think Salem's idea is to just bring back his bishop to b1 and launch an attack. c5 by Parham Maghsoodloo. He's like, I'm not going to let you attack, I'm going to play c5, although bishop takes c4 would have been a better move. Now c takes d5, he takes the pawn in the center, ed. The bishops are exchanged, knight comes to a6, queen e2 attacking the knight, and now c4. One of the drawbacks of the move c4 is that you have lost the tension in the center, and White has a clear plan now to play f3 and e4. Rook e8, trying to stop this plan, but Salem anyway goes ahead with it. He plays his pawn to f3, queen c6, a multi-purpose move, trying to stop e4, but he anyway goes e4. Salem's idea is that if you take on e4, I will take your pawn on c4. That is the point. And now Parham is in deep thought, because if he can't take on e4, white pawn is pushing ahead to e5, and then the f pawn will move forward. But guys, did you notice that the pawn on a4 is also hanging? Whoa, that is something that Parham is thinking about. Should he now go and snatch the pawn on a4? It's a free pawn to be taken, but it doesn't look very appetizing. White's pawns are rolling in the center, and you have to be careful. It somehow reminds us of this famous game of Botvinnik versus Capablanca. He takes the pawn on a4, and now the bishop on a3 is hanging, so you can't do much just as yet. You can't push your pawn in the center, but rook a1 is a nice move, defending his bishop, and now the bishop can move somewhere to give a discovered attack as well. Parham comes back with his queen. He says to Salem, I'm not afraid of your central pawn phalanx here. I'm just going to come back. I have my pawns on the queen side, which are passers here. I'll start pushing them. So Salem Saleh taking his time here, and he goes pawn push to e5. He has pushed his pawn forward, although he's not threatening anything much because of the pin down the e file. You can see the rook is looking opposite the queen. So right now the knight cannot be taken. This is the moment where all the creativity has to come into the game. because white is bringing forth his best attack on the king side and in the center. Parham moves his knight away from a6 and he says, I'm ready to start pushing my queen side pawns. Queen d1, knight to d7 and f4. There we go. The pawns are rolling forward. And Parham now plays his knight to b5. That's a very nice move. Queen to f3. And now the threat could be to play f5 in the position. But Parham just ignores it and plays a5. He's like, I don't care about your pawn pushing forward. And here a blunder by Salem. He pushes the pawn to f5, knight a3, rook a3. And there you have it, knight e5. Salem shakes his head over there. He's not happy with what he has done. The main point is that if you take the knight on e5, there is queen c5 check, and guys, loose pieces drop off. The rook on a3 is hanging. That's the reason why this position is suddenly turned into a losing one. If only Salem would have moved his king to h1 somewhere, this game would have been much more exciting. But now you have to take the knight. The main reason is that if you are not going to take the knight, you have lost one of the most critical pawns in the position. After that, you are completely lost. So you can see Salem here trying to get to the grips with the new situation. This is always a tough moment for chess players because they had imagined that things would turn out differently, and then suddenly with one blunder your position has gone downhill. From trying to win, now you get into the survival mode here. He takes the knight on e5, queen c5 check, king h1 here, and plays his queen to g3. With this, he does two things. He defends his pawn on e5 and also threatens f6. Parham goes rook a7, but f6, the mate in one, is threatened. g6 is played. He brings his knight into the position, defending e5, getting ready to go to d4. Now Parham could have taken the pawn on c3, but he goes back. He's being very, very safe and solid. He says that I don't want to worry about my dark squares, and now the a pawn is pushing forward, but Salem's knight comes to b5, attacking the rook. Rook to d7 and queen to g4. Although black has tremendous material advantage, white is in the game now because he's defended his e5 pawn. There are some dark square weaknesses, and now he's going to win back his exchange. Knight to c7, king h7. Parham is like, you can take my exchange if you like, but I have now made my king safe. h4 by Salem. Well, there was another stronger move apart from h4, which was to push the pawn to e6, but he goes h4 and now queen to c5. This once again gives white a tactical opportunity, and this time Salem takes it. He pushes his pawn to e6. What a classy move. With this, he defends his knight and also frees up the f pawn d4, because h5 was a real threat. He now controls h5. Now knight e8 had to be played, but a mistake. e7. He pushes his pawn. It's a very natural move because he's attacking a rook, but Parham has seen it through. Now the knight on c7 is taking the rook, pawn is taking the other rook, but d takes c3. What a calm and cool move. Knight e8 has been taken. Rook e8. By the way, if e takes d8 would have been taken, Parham would have simply taken back here and he would be better. So knight e8, rook e8, queen e4, but 4 extra pawns on the queen side are really, really strong. b5, h5. Salem still trying to attack. You can see what an aggressive player he is. He never ever stops attacking his opponent's king. h5, and Parham brings his queen over so that his king is safe. Salem's time is very low. He's down to 17 seconds. He takes the pawn on g6. Queen takes g6. And now, of course, you cannot exchange the queens because 4 pawns on the queen side are just too strong. And he's thinking there is a 10-second increment per move, so you can afford to go lower down on time. The only trump for white is his pawn on e7. He brings his queen to d5 and now a2. Oh my god, the pawn is moving forward. Slowly and steadily, black pawns have reached the final rank here. A2 takes on b5. Now the rook is hanging in the position, so careful here. You can't blunder the rook. Check by Parham to the white king. And the king moves to h2. What do you do about the rook on e8? That is hanging, and right now you can go for a check on e2, king g3, because if you go king g1 then queen takes g4 is hanging. But Parham first goes rook to g8. He saves his rook. Now the e pawn is not queening. There is queen e2 check in the air. There is also queen takes g4. And so Salem quickly gives a check with his king. Queens are traded. And now we go into a rook endgame. Is the e7 pawn stronger or these disconnected queenside pawns? What is more important in this position? That has to be seen. It's clear that black has extra material, but are his pawns qualitatively good enough? He pushes his pawn to h5, makes some space for the king. Salem knows that he cannot really go and capture any of the black pawns, because once two pawns come on the 7th rank, they just support each other. King to h6. And now he brings his rook to e1. There's no real threat in the position, because if you make a queen, then I'll take it. Rook takes e8, and then rook takes e8, and then c1 is queening. So you really can't make a queen for now. But Salem is setting up a trap. His last few seconds, he brings his king to h4, and Parham wants to play his rook to e8, because now he realizes that if he's not careful, black will queen, white will queen, rook e8, and when black will queen, there is a check on h8 and it's a mate. So that's the reason why he wanted to place his rook on e8, but he stopped in tracks. This is high quality, top class thinking, guys. Top players, when they see an obvious move, when they see a good move, they look for a stronger move. Now Parham is thinking, can he set a trap? He pushes his pawn to c3, but has he blundered? Look at this. Salem gets excited. He picks up his queen. He thinks that he's going to win now. He can make e8 queen, but he realizes that Parham has set a deep trap. If you make e8 queen, he wants to give c1 queen in the position, and queen g8 is met with queen e1 check. Wow, what a moment there. He puts his queen aside because that was not working, and now Parham brings his king over, check here. And once again you will notice how Parham is walking on the edge of the precipice. He goes king f4, if rook takes g8, then c1 queen, if e8 queen, then queen h1 is a checkmate. What tremendous bit of calculation here. Once the black king has entered the position, it is all but over here. King h2. Now Parham taking his time here. He knows that he has the game in the bag. There is nothing much to worry about because his king has been activated, and the main trouble for white is that he has only one pawn alone who is very strong, and he can always be stopped by the rook from e8. So rook e8, and now the king is ready to march in here, or it can already start picking up these pawns. King h3, Parham takes the first pawn, a check here. King g5, and now he can give up one of his queenside pawns, and then round up these two pawns on f6 and e7. What a game this has been. King g3, Salem knows the writing is on the wall, yet he makes a few moves. A queen is promoted, rook to c1, king f6, and now the e7 pawn is also hanging. Salem tries rook a1, but Parham does not give him a chance. c2, you can't take the pawn because it's queening. It's one of those games where there was so many things that happened that after the game both the players are kind of speechless. What should we talk about? There were so many moments to speak. Both these players, great champions, one from UAE, one from Iran, fought like lions on the board, and a great game which ended in the favor of Parham Maghsoodloo. It